City Club members, friends, and community members joining us here at the River House and watching us online, welcome. My name is Jacob Fain, and I am your City Club of Central Oregon Board President. For those joining us at the River House today, please find information at your table on how to submit questions for our Q&A and to participate in our audience questions. And for those online, please look in the chat for this information. Before we begin today's program, I'd be remiss if I did not mention the tragic shooting that took place last month in Bend. As we've seen numerous times across the country, a young man, 20 years old here, found a solution to life's problems by taking the lives of others as well as himself. I'd like to recognize City Club board member Ruth Williamson, who wrote a very moving letter to the Bulletin as a way of expressing her grief and asking hard questions after this gruesome event. In her letter, she wrote, "How are my actions and choices a part of the web of intersections that allow this kind of suffering here?" In 2017, The Atlantic published an article titled, "How Iceland Got Teens to Say No to Drugs." The article details research-based system-wide change that involved the government, parents, educators, children to reduce addiction across Iceland. The results were staggering. In one example, the number of teenagers who self-proclaimed to be drunk in the month prior reduced from 42% in 1998 to 5% in 2016. So how are our actions, our choices, allowing this kind of suffering here in Central Oregon? Who's being left behind? Who's feeling marginalized? Whose problems are we ignoring because they're not our problems? And what are we going to do different to respond to these and many more difficult questions? With that, I'd like to thank our community platinum and gold sponsors and partners who bring us together each and every month to look inwardly on Central Oregon, to learn, to engage in these tough conversations, and to grow as a community. Please join me in thanking our supporters, ASI Wealth Management, the City of Bend, Central Oregon Community College, Oregon State University Cascades, St. Charles, Pacific Source, Central Oregon Association of Realtors, and Brooks Resources, and today's supporting sponsors, OSU Cascades and Central Oregon Community College. Please give them a round of applause. And moderating our forum today is Chloe Crabtree. Chloe's the sponsor relations lead at the Bend Chamber. Chloe grew up in a small town in the Appalachian Mountains of Western North Carolina and migrated westward in 2015 after finishing her degree in sustainable development at Appalachian State University. She also serves as the board secretary for Boys and Girls Club of Bend and is committed to helping further their mission and serve local youth. When she's not working or volunteering, you can find her writing comedy, binging podcasts, biking, snowboarding, or hiking with her partner and pup, Bryn. Chloe, please join us up here.
That's a great introduction. Thank you. Wow, thank you for the bio. How many of you guys use your degree? Wow. The difference between boomers and millennials. Okay, we're gonna talk about it. Not to segue too quickly and make it fun, but I would love to make it fun today. We're chatting about millennials with millennials. What a joy. Maybe we'll even cover why we don't use our degrees. No. So we've got an exciting day ahead of us. I think we've got some panels, so please silence your cell phones, but keep them close by, so that you can participate in polls and questions. Feel free to whip those out. So millennials are also known as the Generation Y. And we've talked a lot, especially in the last year, 18 months, 2 years, I don't know, about recruiting and retention. It's been kind of hard. I don't know if anyone's noticed. So we kind of want to dive deeper into this idea around what has shaped millennials and why millennials are in part the way that they are. Because they're stepping into leadership roles right now, if they haven't already done so. And so we really want to kind of maybe demystify some things, have an open discussion, and hear from you all about, what do you really want to understand and know? I think it's kind of the reaching across the aisle and being like, how can we understand the individuals that are shaping politics or our places of work in our communities? So this Generation Y, predominantly born of boomers. I know, shocking, I'm a millennial as well. We've actually been out of college for quite some time. I think sometimes I chat with folks and they're like, aren't you still in college? Like, no, haven't been there for a while. We most notably have been shaped by the expansion of the internet and social media, the Great Recession, which I know was fun for everybody, and 9/11. And we actually surpassed the boomer population quite recently. Not that it's a competition, but we did. We're bigger. So we're really going to get into this discussion to chat a little bit more about those major events that have shaped millennials, their worldviews, challenges that they face both personally and professionally, decisions they make, and ultimately how we can better support them in their personal lives and their professional lives, because ultimately they'll be leaders. If they're not already leaders, they're emerging leaders. And if we want to continue to build a successful and thriving community, we really need to encourage millennials and the generation who's stepping into these leadership roles. So without further ado, no one's having issues with a Menti poll, I hope? Okay, we're good to go. So further ado, I welcome Xavi Borja, Lauren Simpson, and Katie Pelchar. I love how I tripped up your names here at the last second. Please come visit me on the stage. Love that microphone feedback. I'm trying to figure out how far away here. Okay, so I'm going to have everyone introduce themselves a little bit and also chat maybe about one or two things in their lives that have really shaped who they are. And so, since you're closest to me, I'm going to let you go first, Katie.
All right, awesome. Katie Pelcher. I'm a sales manager and loan consultant at Loan Depot. In my bio, if you read it, I did the millennial van life, and so I think that kind of shaped who I was. I grew up in Welches, so really small town, went to Monmouth, Western Oregon University, also a very small town, moved to upstate New York in another small town, but across the way it was kind of neat to just pick up everything that I owned at the time and just plant my roots in every city that I stopped at, and it felt like the world was a little smaller after being in such a smaller town and to be able to see a lot more. So yeah, Bend is the biggest city I've lived in.
I'm Lauren Simpson. I'm a product manager at Suterra. We're a global sustainable pest control company here in Bend. I would say an event that shaped my life is I lived in St. Thomas in the U.S. Virgin Islands for about 3 years. After I graduated college, and I was a dive instructor there. I managed a shop, and that was my career in my life for a while. And it was, as Chloe mentioned, I'm a millennial, definitely, and so I graduated into many poor economic climates, and that was an opportunity to earn a living and also kind of explore. And I realized that I'm a born and raised Bend girl, that I wanted to be here. So I kept kind of coming back, and it was a really formative experience for me, as well as a lot of fun.
Hello, everyone. I'm Xavier Borja. I work for the City of Bend as a community relations manager with an emphasis on partnerships and equity. And I think the reason why I'm here, right? It's like I was born in 93, right? So that is a life experience that has shaped me into the world and environment in which I'm in. But I think personally and like professionally, I think was moving and living in San Francisco. So I grew up in Madras. I was born in Redmond and grew up in Madras. I've lived in Bend now for like 11 years. But being in a huge metropolitan city, I was really exposed to these conversations around like DEI, right? Diversity, equity, and inclusion, and what that meant and what that looked like. And I realized at that time, this was like in 2018, that wasn't really happening in the area that I was from, and especially in the area that I grew up, which made me want to come back, which again ultimately shaped who I am today, again, outside of being born in the time that I was born, which makes me a millennial. And so that in itself has shaped me.
Thanks, guys. So it's behind you awkwardly, and we don't have to. I'm getting on board with this technology. Kim is very good at this stuff, and so if millennials are known for being great at tech. That is not true. I'd like to demystify that immediately. There are still problems with that. So I can't see it on my iPad, but this is the age range of millennials in 2022, which is interesting. I think that a lot of folks
They got it right.
They did get it right. And so you graduate college in usually like 23, right? So when people are like, "Did you just graduate?"
Yeah, and you're like,
Most
"No, it
millennials.
was a while ago."
I've been done.
And so here's a couple terms that come to mind as far as what you all think of when you think of millennials. So young, adventurous, work-life balance, active, creative. I love techie. That's hilarious. Job jumper. That feels good. Progressive, self-absorbed. I love the honesty here. Let's get into it.
It's all anonymous.
Yeah, no, that's so great. Purpose, social media obsessed. Yeah, self-absorbed, self-centered, optimistic. Okay, so now that we have a full scope of millennials, do you guys have any immediate reaction to these?
So many.
You guys really
Yeah,
bolstered us up.
so many.
Yeah, jump in, Zavi. You want to start?
Sure.
Any that you agree or disagree with?
I think the first thing is like this job jumper, right? So like my mom calls me the shiny boy, right? I've never had a job longer than probably like 2 years, I think because of that. But I really reflect on it, and the word that sticks out to me is that work-life balance, right? So I think we millennials think of work very differently, to where we want to incorporate a lot of our personal life and our personal experiences into our work. And when and if that doesn't coincide, then it's like, well, let me see, there's so many opportunities. Like it's at my fingertip. I can go on Instagram and everyone's like, oh, we're hiring. And if it suits me, then I might be able to explore that because it fits better with my personal life and my ideas rather than, one organization.
I think that's interesting. I've been in my job for 5 years, so I don't know that I would call myself a job jumper by any means. In the career before that, 3 years. But I think that we don't necessarily want to be job jumpers. We don't want to change careers every 2 years. I think it takes, in a lot of places, a year or more to really kind of get your feet under you. And for the organization as well, it benefits if you stay. But as Zavi mentioned, a work-life balance can be funded by your career, right? We're not there not for a paycheck. We're in a career and in a job. And so I think our generation demands that those needs continue to be met. And if they're not, then we'll move on and find those needs being met somewhere else. I think the statistic is something like a 20 or 30% raise every time you shift organizations. What organization can you think of that gives someone a 30% raise every 2 years?
Especially in Bend.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, in this type of community. And so there's a lot of opportunity there to move on, and there's no shame in that. We almost, I would say, as a generation, take pride in the fact that we are supporting ourselves and advocating for ourselves and finding those opportunities in new places. And we're strong contributors when we're there. We're fast learners. So hopefully when we move from place to place, we're contributing as quickly as possible.
Yeah, I'll add on to that. I mean, obviously that's a big one that stands out to me too, the job jumper, which is such a big change from the family I grew up in. My dad was a sole income earner for my whole family. He'd been at the job since he was 18 years old and moved from New York to Oregon. He retired 3 years ago, maybe, after 33 years in the same field, same job. So a totally different perspective to then be now like, what am I going to do? Like, I might have more opportunity here, but I also find it like at some point I've also been at the job for the last 6 years. So mind you, I'm not jumping around too much, but I see the value in getting different management, getting different opinions, and providing more to it. I think that his pension, his opportunity for retirement, what he got out of it by the long term in the company has also changed drastically as I start to see my 401k match come down a lot, and a lot of different dynamics aren't the same level that they used to be, and so now we look for those opportunities. But I also read a really interesting statistic on how much it's actually costing the whole country on just those job changes. So maybe something to think about as you are trying to find ways to keep that retention, how much it could cost you in rehiring for a new one too.
Yeah, if it costs you $55,000 to train a new employee, what would it cost? But are you paying that to keep that employee?
Yeah.
Maybe that makes us self-centered or self-concerned.
I really like Rebel on here. I don't know who put that in, but maybe I add it to Instagram. I don't know.
I liked Instagram-y.
Yeah, Instagram-y. That was a good one. Yep. So rolling into some questions, what are some things that inspire, animate, and challenge you? I know that's a big one. Take your time, but not too much time. I'm on an agenda.
I think Instagram, Facebook, that's all like so much of what shaped us. We've had social networking. Gosh, when I was in 8th grade, I got my first Facebook account. I think that was about when that came in, and before that it was MySpace, right? And so we've always had this access to comparing ourselves to other people and having that reference back to kind of where we are. So what inspires me is totally just seeing other people in what they're doing in their jobs, what they're doing in their lives, right? Like, I want to be as successful as I can, but I also want to enjoy things outside of work as much as I can, because that's what I'm constantly seeing too. I have a unique job in being in sales that I do want to encapsulate as many people as I can. If you guys ever need a home loan, right? I want to be the person you come to, but I also want you to want to work with me. And sometimes it takes kind of taking that barrier away from that. Obviously, I'm not going to wear a suit and tie, but if you do, that's a totally intimidating factor now for a different generation. So it inspires me to be my authentic self at all times, and I think that takes me further in my career.
I want to build on something that you just said. So we've looked at the age range of millennials, and I must be the older of our millennials here. I don't know, but I didn't have, and I think the point about it is that the technology moves so fast. So our generation may be close in age, but the changes that happened within us were so quick. So you had Facebook in, what did you say, 8th grade? I didn't get it until I was a freshman in college. I didn't have MySpace until middle school, or AIM in the end of middle school, right? So although we are all in that same group together, our generation's one of the first that had those changes happen so quickly. So even just within a couple years of each other, it's different. Our lives were a little different. So that didn't answer the question, but I thought that was really interesting. I was kind of shocked by that.
Yeah.
What inspires me? I think so much. I mean, the biggest thing is the future. I think the possibilities, and I think inherently humans have inherited this resiliency. And I think that's kind of where we're at when we think of like the future of work and like what this looks like. And I'm thankful for my employer to kind of have that in like a policy to figure out what that looks like, understanding that things are and are going to continue to change. So my sister and I are 10 years apart. So 2 of her years in high school were virtual, right? 2 years. And I really reflect on that too, where that was her and that whole host of generations norm. Right, so where I'm thinking like future of work-life balance, technology, all these different components towards like how are we, or can we, and are we setting these things up for not only ourselves but for the next generation to continue like these successes of our organizations, of our nonprofits, of our corporation, profits, all these different things, and kind of tying into profits, where I think for myself personally, to I think a lot of other millennials, we're trying to tie this concept of profit and purpose, and trying to see where and what that looks like from an individual standpoint, but also understanding that it's like, okay, we've experienced a lot of these things that Chloe had talked about, whether it's like 9/11 or just the internet itself. Like, we're really connected almost too much, we could argue, right? But I think being thoughtful and intentional with those things, I think, is something that really inspires me, and I get excited for, because I think we do have and are playing a part within that. It's just being really thoughtful as we move forward within those things.
Shameful plug, because it is a chamber. It's a chamber program, but
I think I already did the shameful plug.
oh no,
I got
that's
that out of
fine.
the way
Why
for
not?
you.
Let's do it. We're millennials. Is being around the young professionals group through the chamber, and also going out and chatting with folks through chamber events, and really being exposed to so many different demographics and age groups here. That's so inspiring for me to hear from so many different sectors, and really talking to folks who are both younger and older, and hearing what's on their mind, like what's important to them. Why are they here in Bend or Central Oregon, and what do they want to contribute? That is something that's inspiring weekly, honestly, is just hearing from everybody. I want to pull the last part out of that original question, which was a little dense, sorry, about the challenges. It could be personal or professional or a combo, but I'm curious what has been really challenging, especially in recent years, other than COVID, but feel free to chat
I'll
about that
start.
more too.
So I have been just recently speaking with my manager about this, but similar to that sort of generational divide or changes or separations, I think that we as millennials got a lot of bad advice from older generations, and by bad advice I mean advice that helped us get where we are. So it was successful in the way in which we did it, but it's not necessarily socially advancing or DEI friendly, right? Like I know that I dressed differently today than I dress at home. If I came up here with my top knot and my leggings on, you guys wouldn't have taken me as seriously or wanted to listen to what I have to say as much, right? So I don't necessarily want to give that advice to Gen Z, sorry. X is before, Z is after. I don't want to give that advice as a leader to the people coming up behind me. It's where I got where I am today, but it's not necessarily good advice. And I think that that's a huge challenge currently in leadership, because this next generation behind us really demands to be authentic. They demand that they get to show up like themselves. And to them, it's not even a demand, it's just what you do. And I think millennials we don't feel that way, right? Like we're like, we tried our best to conform, we did this over here, we listened, and that's what got us here. So we're a little bit more, as a generation, I think, timid. And I think that can be very challenging, because you're looking at this, I'll wrap it up. Sorry, you're looking at this advice and you're saying it got me where I am, but also I don't necessarily want to give it to someone else. So finding a way to balance those two things has been a challenge for me as a emerging leader recently.
I want to play off that. I think just in what you said is a challenge, something that I wrestle with as well. That's like I internalize that as like assimilation, almost in a multitude of ways, right? It's like you thought or think that folks here in this room, depending on maybe they're not millennials, will not take you as seriously if I'm not dressed the way that I am, right? And kind of taking that, for me, it's like, okay, how do we get maybe like rebel, right? It's like push that a little bit. Sometimes at work I'll wear like jean shorts. I'm like, oh, like you look so comfortable, and it's like, yes, that doesn't mean I'm not productive. That doesn't mean these other like kind of things that we're like, okay, the workforce, the workplace, professionalism means these things. I think that in itself is a challenge. So it's like we're trying to conform to be a part of these conversations, but at the same time, it's like we're also wanting to be like ourselves and like bring our own flavor, our own, ideas within that. But at the same time, in order for us to get there, we feel the need to conform, whether it's like, this formality of an email, formality of the way I dress, formality in the way I speak, whatever that is, to be at that table of decisions to then move whatever it is forward because of that. Inherently, whether it's true or not, I think there is a lot of validity to it. But again, it's just like, if I came up here in sweats and a tee, like maybe not as serious, right? But who knows?
It can apply to other things too, right? Like even topics, like bringing politics into the workplace or just opinions or thoughts, right? So like we had a shooting in our town. We were talking about it earlier, right? And to come into work and to feel like you can speak about that or you can't speak about that because immediately other things or other affiliations will get assigned to you, right? So how do you bring your whole self to work? How do you discuss challenging topics while still remaining professional, while respecting people and their differences? And I think that's a big challenge that we face, and it's different generationally. Once again, I think the generation behind us comes in like, what do you mean you're not going to talk about this? Of course. Like, this is, I'm just going to state my opinion and we'll all move on. And us as millennials and probably boomers are like, don't ever say anything. And millennials are like, oh, maybe, I don't know. But we tend to like water it down or not state our opinion, but just talk about the fact.
I think social media has taken that in a lot of different ways too, because it goes both ways, right? Now we have the access to knowing what everyone is like, and maybe you are connected with people you work with, or maybe you aren't intentionally for that reason too. So it kind of, the access to having more insight and more everything kind of shapes a lot of that. So, but I did make the decision to wear tennis shoes today. and I went to my boyfriend and I said, do these shoes look better or these? And he said, tennis shoes are more you. So I went with that. But my challenge, I'm going to add, obviously I'm biased in working in the housing and being in Bend, but I think the obvious affordability and cost of living versus wage increase has been a huge part of what shaped us as a generation. I lived with roommates until I moved in with my boyfriend now, and I know that I couldn't afford to live in Bend independently by myself at the wage that I was at when I was growing up through the early stages of my career. And so I think it's really common for people in their late 20s, early 30s to either live with parents, live with numerous roommates, not just one, or live with multi-generational. I guess, honestly, I've had parents move back in, so I think that's been an interesting one. I think you brought that up, Lauren. But that changes everything of who we are too, right? If you're living by yourself, you're shaping who you want to be, where you're going, versus me living with my friends. Like, my day in and day out was very different. I played board games and drank beer often on a weeknight, which probably wouldn't have been the case if it was by myself. So I think that's really shaped who I am.
I like that you brought up the bad advice, because I think that's something really interesting. I don't think, obviously, that advice was given thinking, man, I want to lay out bad advice for this next generation, but it was a completely different economic time. Mm-hmm. So folks were giving advice based on what they grew up with and their college experience and their lived experience, and like copy paste, it doesn't pencil. And so I can understand and see how there's a rub between generations now of like not understanding those points and how that didn't carry over. I think that's a good segue into our next question, which is how can, our community, our employers, maybe even our peers really help support young professionals and millennials, personally or professionally?
I'll take that right away. I think because there's so little of a line behind professional and, what's the other word? Personal, thank you. The other P word. Because there's such a blurred line there, I think it's really important to open that door, to be transparent, to take time outside of work, if that's where your role is, if you're in a leadership role, to find out who they are and show them that you respect them regardless of your differences in it. I think Bend is while my biggest community that I've been in is still a very small community, and we've been really lucky to have our city councils debates that I ran into him at Little Woody, Olive Tatum, right? Oliver Tatum. So it's just neat to have the very different opinions that you might run into the person and be able to have a conversation and speak your differences in a respectful way. But just that being the same as far as respect for, you ski, I snowboard, right? It's a different thing, but it's just a commonality that you can just make the ground a little different on.
I'll go next, sure. I think remaining open to different qualifications is something that people can do to help service our generation in particular. So, and especially within our community, right? We have not a resort community per se, but there's a lot of like tourism or other, what is the word I'm looking for? Recreation-based professions that
Hospitality?
people. Yeah, hospitality. Thank you. And those people who are coming out of those positions, I worked in the restaurant industry for a long time before I worked at Sutera, and the best skills that I have that I use every single day, and now I'm in my corporate professional job, come from those restaurant industry experiences. They come from managing a dive shop, and they do not come from my Bachelor's of Science in Environmental Economics. And so I think remaining open to different ways that people can get to a position that they're in, and then once they are in those positions, continuing to remain open to different ways of work. So making sure to focus on the results and the things that people are delivering, and not necessarily the way in which they got there. So if I take an hour off to go to a conference for my son, or I, have a doctor's appointment, or I participate in Bend YP, and I attend a monthly meeting for that during the 9 to 5, which is definitely not what I work, but meaning more, sorry. Please listen. But understanding what you deliver out of that can be the same. If it doesn't matter that I check in from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. every single day, it matters what I'm contributing to the organization and the top line benefits that we're getting from me as an employee. So remaining open to the intro and during.
I would probably say I would encourage folks here in the room, right, to use this as an opportunity, like now that it's maybe more front of mind, to talk to your employees, to your employers that are millennials. I think they have the answer, right? Whatever it is that they need and are wanting, listen to that, and also execute on that. Whatever it is that you take from here, whatever it is that they say, try to encourage and put that throughout your organization. And I think as far as a community, to me personally, would probably be housing. I think, you brought up a really good point, and that's for me personally why I've jumped to so many jobs, to where it's I cannot wait for somebody to retire in 15 years and work at this mid-level job at 17, 20 bucks an hour, and especially in live in Bend, right? So I think understanding that concept and that kind of synergy within those two concepts, and understanding that as a community, whatever agency you work with, to try to advocate for whatever that looks like in terms of housing. There's a lot of things that are around, right? Affordable housing, workforce housing, whatever that is. But I think really utilize your platform as an employer to advocate for the future generations like us and after us.
Another great segue into our last question before we hear from you guys. So what are some obstacles that exist today in career and your life that you feel are holding people back, whether it's yourself or maybe your direct peers? Debt. I don't know, home buying.
Yeah.
Debt's so fun to talk about. Let's talk about it. No.
I think, so this is something that I am on the opposite, not typical millennial side of. I got the greatest gift that I've ever been given, which was from my parents paying for my college education. I'm one of very few people that I know that does not have any school debt. I have no student loans to pay back, and that afforded me access to a lot of other opportunities after graduating, especially when graduating into a poor economic climate where jobs weren't readily available. So I think that is one of the main challenges for my age group in particular. Many of my friends are paying student loans, and they can't add a mortgage on top of that or use that money to save for a down payment or something different when they're paying for the education that may or may not have gotten them the job that they currently have. So I think that debt is a huge, huge challenge for our generation in particular. But we all experience it differently, right? That's not my challenge, and yet I still cannot afford to buy a house here in Bend. So I think affordability and debt go sort of hand in hand.
And I'll kind of play off that to where it's folks know how like that works, right? It's like my debt to income ratio, right, is not skewed, but it's like it's limited because of like that debt, right? Because like my generation, my parents are like, you know, go to school, get a good job, buy a house, you're set, right? But if I were to buy a home right now, my mortgage would be $3,000. Right, so like I think that's a perspective as well, to where it's like there's not a lot of jobs. Like trust me, I would love to work still at the Boys and Girls Club and be at, you know, the games room staff if I could make a living, right? But I think that's not the reality. So trying to find an area, a sector, an employer that can support or try to support the trajectory to which we're at, to which a lot of us in this room know, right? So I think that is a huge challenge, and to want to stay here, but frankly just cannot, or that's a huge challenge to really start to think strategically of like, can I see myself here long term in, or not, let's say 5 years? Maybe I want to be, but I think that's a big challenge for a lot of millennials, to where again, like $3,000 is quite a bit for a mortgage, and that to your point, to where it's like, okay, now I have to live with like 3-4 different people, which is like fine, but at the same time, at some point, I don't want to do that. But this area doesn't necessarily allow that, just to give them circumstances and what it is. Again, copy and paste, right? It's like, went to school, got a degree, have a good job, still cannot though. I think that's a huge challenge.
And I think too, like adding to that, our generation is that we're getting married older, we're having kids older. We had that chunk after education that was really challenging. And once again, that economic climate, we didn't get that head start, right? And so to what I was talking about at 32, I don't necessarily want a roommate. At 25, yeah, man, sign me up. But that wasn't the opportunity that we had at those younger ages. So some of it is choice and some of it is circumstance, for sure. I think it's both.
If you don't classify as a millennial at 25, raise your hand if you had a roommate. Pretty minimal. Yeah, anyways, I was just curious, just hearing you say that. I think that the challenge is definitely on, I want to say the cost of living in general, which is what we're going to keep coming back to. But what we're not taking into perspective is the cost of living and how that's going to affect us in retirement as we get to that age, and how we're not having children, so we're not setting us up for success in having an easy retirement either, because we've talked about the Sonsdemic. Your old manager had brought up to me of just, we're going to get to the retirement age. If the economy is in a good position, we might be able to retire, and then are we going to be able to and still have enough people to satisfy the life that we want to live, as far as being able to employ the jobs that we are leaving or vacating. So it's a really interesting, I think that that's probably going to be the hardest thing. Meanwhile, we are hardly finding enough to be able to afford a house. Do we have enough to be putting it away into 401k? Are our employers helping us put it into a 401k? I see this so much from home loan is obviously not financial planning, but when I talk to people and I say, hey, we just want to look at your reserves, how much do you have in a 401k? And it's 35-year-olds that have nothing. It's really hard for me to stomach that because I know what that translates to, and you guys probably do too.
Yeah, what's going to happen to Social Security?
Social insecurity was the good.
Well, I don't have kids because I just cannot afford them. It doesn't pencil out for me to have kids for at least 7 more years, and by then, why have them? Okay, why have them? All right, let's have some fun. Let's pivot to you guys. You guys can ask questions, and I'll stop asking
Sorry to
questions.
leave that on such a somber note. I'm so sorry.
Katie and I are both raising kids, so
Can't afford a house, can't afford kids. I think it's great you guys are doing the kid thing.
Yeah. I think that just to touch on that, and I thought it would come up naturally through it, but I wanted to bring up, so Lauren and I both have been in our long-term relationships now with her fiance, which is very fun. But I've been with my boyfriend for just about 5 years, and he has an 11-year-old daughter. He's on the other side of the spectrum, 9 years older than me, but he's still in the millennial category. So kind of fun to be in the same household with very different perspectives of what we went through in the recession to where we are now, and him having gone through raising actually 2 kids from his ex-wife and his own child, to now we have her 50% of the time too. So that lifestyle is not something I foresaw for myself growing up with married parents with a dad that had the same job for 30 years to now being in a mixed household with lots of different, the life happens, everything's very different, but it's very common. Lauren and I, when we met and we finally started talking about that and learned that there was someone else in the same social circle with us who also was in the same situation. His girlfriend, older, with a 13-year-old. He's the same age as me. And if you want to share, not to.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I co-parent a senior in high school. He's a 17-year-old. And yeah, that his father is 5 years older than me. So very different challenges, I think, for both of us in our formative years, obviously. But I wouldn't have it any other way. We were just recently talking about my engagement. I just got engaged, and nothing. Thank you. Nothing has really changed for us. It feels very similar to my partner and I, but our families feel very different, and it's pretty interesting. Extended community also feels a little different. There's no word for co-parent of child without referencing your partner, but there is a word stepmom, right? And so it feels a little different to be received differently in that way. But I think a lot of people in our generation have sort of similar situations or different situations. There's a lot of unique family dynamics that millennials experience. So.
See, and I'm very opposite, right? To where I'm like,
I got a dog.
By like fear almost, maybe like from my parents, or like just like circumstances, where it's like I need to have everything set up before I even think about doing those like things, right? And I'm 28, so I'm just like, okay, I need to really have my stuff set up, because if not, then it's like I don't want to be in a position to where either my parents were, like in 08, right, whatever that looks like. To again, like for me, it really is like almost fear to like have that stuff set up, or to try to ensure that is set up.
I thought it was worth mentioning as the Q&As come.
No, I love it. I should have been looking at the Q&As already. So I was listening
gave
to
you
you
time?
guys. Yeah, no, you didn't. Ooh.
That one, yes.
Yeah, that one. Let's do this one. Let's see. Again, the technology.
I'm bad
I was like,
at
yeah,
technology,
Kim, I've
too.
got it. I have it. I have not reached the end of the presentation. Oh, no. Okay, what I remember of the question, and if you're the person who asked it, please feel free to jump up and say the full question. But could we chat a little bit about quiet quitting? And I know there was a second part to this. Thank you. God, I'm useless.
I've seen this on the internet recently.
Yeah.
Never heard of
Quiet
I have
quitting.
heard of
Yeah.
quiet quitting.
It's pretty new.
I believe that it means, no, it has nothing to do with quitting, actually. I believe that it means like showing up to do the base level of your job. So no longer going
Or
above
being-
and beyond.
Or being a remote worker and not being as present. Is that the other idea of it?
Yeah, it's very,
I guess, do we have a definition for quiet?
does the question asker have a definition for quiet quitting that they'd like to share? Doing the bare minimum, okay.
She was right.
We've ended the presentation again. I might do a hand raise here. I know Jen Greco and I have talked about the quiet quitting quite a bit.
I don't know. I think that's an interesting. I've never heard that concept.
It's like the opposite of hustle culture.
Literally, I unfortunately can't resonate. Like it sounds. I would assume it's. Yeah, I'm like it honestly sounds just like this. Of like if this employer, my person who's giving me a job is not going to value me for like my time, all the things that we've talked about, then why should I care? Why would I show up and give like my very most when like they clearly don't value me in whatever way, monetarily, by like my wage or by my work-life balance, whatever it is that I'm needing. That's what I think.
For me, I think that comes down to not having expectations correctly set. Remote work, COVID, everything has kind of shifted how the job role entails and what it is, right? So if you're feeling like someone within your staff is not stepping up to the standards that they should be at, you don't have the means to fire them at this point, because you are trying to find anyone else to fill the roles that's probably missed too, right? Like we're all short-staffed. So with that being said, setting the right expectation and giving that. For me, right, if I was in that role as an employee, I would want my employer to set the expectation and then to say, this is why I expect it, and this is what you get out of it from doing it too, right? How is it going to benefit me and you? Because if me just being there and punching the clock is enough for you, and you're not okay with that, then I'll just find another job, right? I think that's ultimately what it would come down to.
I take so much issue with the term itself. It's just, it's a misnomer, firstly, which just sends me through the roof. But the idea itself, I guess I'll give a little bit of a hot take, I feel like is how boomers worked. You, like a older generation, got a job, you met your expectations, you came home at the end of the day. There was no hustle culture. And that is so ingrained in millennials to like, you've got to be above and beyond. You have to work, you have to earn it. And so, yeah, more power to you if you're gonna quiet quit. Like, are those the goals and the outlines that your manager has set out for you? Are you achieving them? Is there a reach goal for you? Has that been established? Has someone told you that it's expected that you do more? And if it is expected that you do more, then why isn't it included into your compensation, your goal setting, your future planning? There should be no quiet quitting, and I shouldn't have to work more than anyone else around me to get noticed. I should have stretch goals and goals that I can meet. And that should be my job. That should be defined.
Well, and we're available all the time. You know, boomers did not grow up with technology where, like, I've gotten 3 emails on my watch since I've been sitting up here. You know, so
that
there's
have been on the back
I
of
don't
your
think,
mind, probably.
I don't think, oh gosh, I don't think anyone set out thinking, man, I'm going to just take advantage of these millennials because they hustle so hard and they should be available. And that, you know, provides a greater return to my business if they're available 24/7. I really hope no one expects that. But I think that, you know, to your point, the hustle culture, and I think this is funny coming full circle because now I can see the full question.
Totally different.
That's already gone. But it's interesting to me that it's translated as laziness sometimes, when really, to your point, it's expectations. And I think like having that constant and continuous conversation about how do you approach me as a manager? How do we approach one-on-ones? What are the accountability measures that are on paper as KPIs, and what are they as far as like office culture goes? Like what are the
Can you
cultural
define KPI?
key performance indicators?
Thank you.
There we
Thank
go. Okay, so
Hold
what
up. Can I add to that really quickly?
if it's fast, Lauren?
Okay.
No.
Well, now I just forgot what I was going to say. Never mind. Go
I
ahead.
got another email. Okay, so what do boomers expect from millennials that is not reasonable? We might have already just touched on it a little bit.
I think to be available all the time. I work in marketing and product development. The projects that I work on have 3 to 5 year time horizons at the shortest. Some things are involved in product launch for the year, and there is no marketing emergency. There is nothing that will come up that, you know, happens at 9 p.m. that cannot get solved at 7 a.m. the next morning. So I think, you know, I'm not saying that you should only be available during business hours, but to respect the boundaries of work and life, and that you get your employees to show up better and more refreshed and contribute more when you allow them to do that in the time frame that they have put bounds around for themselves.
I was going to say, we're not experts on all technology. That's the
yeah.
unreasonable expectation.
Yeah, for sure.
We may know a bit, but every time that someone's like, oh, you've got to know how to do this, I'm like, no, nope.
I had a Gen Xer teach an Outlook seminar to a lot of millennials. We were like, oh, wow, that has that function? Cool.
I want to take that class.
I think what was the question again? Like, what is an unfair burden or?
Unfair expectation.
I think to me it's just I did it, you can too, type of thing. I think that concept can be folded into a multitude of like different scenarios, but it's like I did it, so can you. You got it.
I paid off my student loans,
Right.
so can you.
Can you, right? And it's like I
though
did
they're
that, so
5
therefore
times what
you
they
should be able to
were.
too. I don't know why you're complaining. Still show up to work, like blah blah blah. You got it. type of thing. So which has unfortunately, I don't say unfortunately, but like made us, I think, extremely resilient and try to like push through a lot of these things and or want to like work more because we need to go to that next level or whatever that looks like.
Yeah.
I literally have to keep asking questions because it'll scroll up to the top. So I'm going to take this opportunity to answer question 6. It's a long one. Brace yourself. How can we learn from the barriers that this millennial generation has faced in order to create pathways for the next generation of leaders, them youngins, and professionals? What are the next steps for the community? God, this one's so hard because I barely understand the younger generation. It's like the
baffling.
puzzle. I'm sure boomers feel the same way about millennials. Like, what the heck is up with them? And I talk to people in their early 20s and I'm like, I'm sorry, you're speaking a different language. Like, what did you just say? No cap? I just learned that over the weekend, and I won't explain it because I don't know.
But
Zavi?
that's so real. I think just that concept itself is something I struggle with too. Where it's like, I'm not even old, and again, like I use my sister as an example because we're 10 years apart, right? And I'm just like, I have no idea what you're saying, but I'm like, okay, if this is how the younger generation, my sister's always, she just got her first internship job, right, at KWSO out on the station on the reservation, and she was like, I don't know why people email all the time. Can't we just use Snapchat? And I'm like. What? Right? I mean, and it's hilarious, right? But at the same time, I'm like, that's so real. Like her and like that generation really thinks like that. To where I'm like, okay, like that's a real concept. Like they're really thinking, like, are really questioning and challenging in their experience, young, right, in the workforce, to be like, okay, really rethinking how we're communicating or how we're doing work, right? So I think for me, it's taking that with like reality and being like, okay. Like try, I don't want to say understand it, but just empathize with it to where, like, you know, what you said, boomers probably think of those things of us, right? And it's like really honing in on that and trying to work with it or have them at the table, kind of the same things that we were expressing around ourselves for the younger generations.
I think having them at the table, I think just opening that conversation, understanding if the barriers for us have been cost of living and affordability, bringing them at the table and having that conversation about what you think we would do differently that would benefit them better.
Yeah, and like remaining open, right? So if Snapchat is suggested as a form of contact, it's sort of that like bad advice thing again, right? Why do we immediately go, absolutely not? Why are we? Yeah, like why do we say that, right? So the same thing from the boomer generation or Gen X to us, like if we make a recommendation or a suggestion, take a minute to say, why do I feel like this is unprofessional? What about this is challenging my level of norm? What's different here? And does it need to remain that way, or can it shift? Should I learn how to use Snapchat? I do not know how. Like, I don't believe that that's a way to, so my initial reaction was absolutely not, that's not a professional way to communicate, but I don't know anything about it. Maybe it could be, I don't know.
And I had a back and forth with her about that, because I was immediately, same thing, not a chance. And I used like my work setting as an example, like there's some legality within that. But she's like, if I want an attachment, you can send an attachment. If you want to send a quick picture, I can send a quick picture. You can save it, you can have it there, you have it in the archives. It has a cache, like you can save it. All these things. So I was like, maybe. Like, I don't know.
Hasn't Snapchat always been that it can disappear? Maybe they've learned from us and that all of our things from our past are coming back up. They're like, no, we got to get rid of that.
The memory,
Please.
like 8 years later. Did we answer the question?
Oh, you totally did. And then I was like, wow, these iPads are pretty cool. I kind of want one now. I'm like, these iPads. Oh, God. What are the, nope, I don't like it. It's negative. I want to end on a light note. We're coming up on time here. So how can City Club better engage with millennials? I think that's a great one to close us out since we're here with City Club. Thank you, City Club.
Change the time.
Change, like the clock, Savi? What
Yeah,
are we
like
talking about here?
daylight
Say
savings
more.
time. So like let's.
Yeah.
No, I think again we're like mid-level, right? It's like and I don't know, like everybody's employers. I'm thankful again that my employer allows me like to do these things, right? But at the same time, it's like, I mean, you know, not in a bad way, but I mean, look at who's in the room, right? It's like changing the time that fits within their schedule, I think makes 100% sense. And we want them to be engaged, but at the same time, it's like if we want that, then we need to meet them where they're at. We can't just expect them to meet, again, the same mold that we are able to, or the folks that are at the table to do that. So meet them where they're at, and I think the biggest thing is change the time.
instead of hearing, when I was
Ooh,
your
that's a
age.
that's a
great
great question.
question. It's a great
If I
question.
had a
I've actually come up
dime-
with that in a lot of different events that we've done because a lot of
There we go.
our other people in employment are working at restaurants in the afternoons too, so that makes it hard. So maybe just a fluidity of times.
I would say evening. Evening makes sense. Like, yeah, evening after.
Not exactly
after
at 5 p.m.
Right. Yeah.
Well, ask if they want advice before you give it first. Yeah. That sounds really negative, but like I think too, which we're not going to break open here and now because we're at time, but I'd also selfishly like people to think about the millennial and boomer power dynamics across genders. Because I think that millennial women coming up in leadership role and how we're maybe viewed or treated from boomers and also other millennial men is a really interesting puzzle piece, because you don't necessarily, I don't think anyone's trying to do this, but you look across at your other peers who are about your same age and maybe a different gender, and this goes for men too. They're treated differently than some millennial women, especially coming into management roles. And it's really unfair. Okay, thanks for coming, guys. I think that, do you have a quick add-on to that?
I was just going to say, as you kind of go back in your workplace or you have that, I think that as I was progressing through career development, just being approached by people in the higher stages of their career, coming to me and being open to having conversations really shaped who I've become too, because I've learned that that isn't a hard barrier. It's always felt like there's these big structures are conforming, like you can't, those people are better than you can't talk to them. And so it was really opening for me to have, Katie Brooks, for an example, write me on LinkedIn and say, I'd love to talk to you the next time. So you guys have a lot of power in how much you reach out and engage with people in the younger generation. And I think I would encourage you to explore that. And that goes for anyone in any generation reaching out to different generations. Goes a long way. But thank you so much for having us.
Yeah,
thank
Katie
you.
just did my closing, so like I don't to regurgitate it. Please just talk to the people around you and the younger folks. As far as those who are coming out of college right now, like they have TikTok. They have TikTok. They have this whole language that we don't understand, and so just remember that you have to ask the questions and come at it with curiosity rather than this like, well, back when I was your age. Anywho, thank you guys so much. I'm going to hand it over to Kim now, finally.
Thank you. So we had, again, about 20 questions that we didn't get to, and I will send those to the panel. It seems to be about 20 every time now. But you also all probably have millennials in your life, and those questions that you might have asked today would be a great question to ask them, whether it's your children or grandchildren or coworkers. They were all perfectly appropriate to ask those you know. So thank you to Chloe, Zavi, Katie, and Lauren for being here today and leading us in conversation. And we greatly appreciate this partnership with the Bend Chamber Young Professionals and to Jen Greco for helping us coordinate this forum today. They worked with us over the past, 4 or 5 months. And then thank you to our elected leaders here today. We have from the Parks Board all the way to County Commission represented here today. On your table, there is a rack card from Envision Bend, who presented at City Club back in June. And when they were here, their survey wasn't quite ready yet. And there's information on there about how you can participate in that survey and the eventual results for the future and vision of Bend. And then finally, on Tuesday, our last Tuesday forum, Tuesday, October 18th, join us for a conversation about whether Central Oregon could be next for ranked choice voting. City Club is also participating and partnering in a number of local and state candidate forums, and those are all coming together as candidate forums do last minute. So cityclubco.org is your best resource to find the dates and locations for those candidate forums, as well as to submit questions to the candidates for those forums. Thank you for being here today. Please continue to cultivate conversation about issues that connect us to build a strong community.